So I want to kind of wrap this all together. We heard from Pompeo. We've been infiltrated by China.
Sure.
Joe Biden's his approval ratings are in the trash. He needs some kind of combat, so he points at Russia because he knows Russia's no real threat, and he doesn't care about China, or at the very least, he wants China to succeed.
In the media, remember, in Washington, D.C., and remember the first impeachment trial, Russia is like, I want to call the 1980s and get their foreign policy back. Russia is considered a 50 times bigger enemy than the Chinese Communist Party. And one of the reasons is the money the Chinese Communist Party has spread all over town with the journalists and all that. Russia is a zero, okay? It is in a demographic despot, and don't get me wrong, they're bad guys run by the KGB with lots of nuclear weapons, okay? And they've got troops. But this situation in Ukraine is a European situation that they forced it on us, and to do it on the commemoration of Pearl Harbor, right? I think is extraordinary for him to do that.
Let me pull up this story. Look at the exact quote here. We have this from Mediaite. GOP senator floats U.S. troops on the ground and nuclear strike against Russia. Quote, I would not rule that out. Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi told Neil Cavuto on Tuesday the U.S. should keep all options available when dealing with a potential Russian aggression against Ukraine. That even includes a first use, a preemptive nuclear strike. That senator appeared on Fox News hours of the teleconference between Biden and Putin. Quote, Senator, some of your Republican colleagues think that we should have troops in the region. They never delineate exactly how many or that they'd be utilized in an outright confrontation with Russia over Ukraine. But their mere presence would be effective. What do you think of that? I'll tell you this, Neil, said Wicker. I would not rule out military action. I think we start making a mistake when we take options off the table. So I would hope the president keeps that option on the table. Cavuto presses. What does military action mean? He says, well, military action could mean that we stand off with our ships in the Black Sea and we rain destruction on Russian military capability. It could mean that we participate, and I would not rule that out. I would not rule out American troops on the ground. He added, we don't rule out first-use nuclear action. We don't think it will happen, but there's certain things in negotiations. If you're going to be tough, you don't take off the table. And so I think the president should say that everything is on the table. Do you know, Steve, the current power, how do I ask this question? The nuclear bombs we used in World War II. Do you know how many times stronger a modern nuclear, an ICBM is? 1,250 times more powerful. Yeah. A multiple independently targeting re-entry vehicle, MIRV, can drop 12 payloads from one ICBM. It is laughable how insane that destruction would be from one. How many does Russia have? They got what, like 50,000? Yeah. The U.S. has what, 25?
This is the type of loose talk. There's one thing about negotiate and leverage. This is the type of, when you actually put on the table a first strike over Ukraine, this country's going to go to war over eastern Ukraine.
Yeah, what is Russia?
This is what we're going to do. And a killing field in World War II. What, 15 million died on the way when the Nazis went through, and 12 million died on the way back, right? And they were fighting for each side. You couldn't tell who was fighting for whom. No, think about it for a second. If people had a belly full of Iraq and Afghanistan in 20 years in the great deplorable sons and daughters who fought there, and my daughter was, after West Point, went to Iraq, she deployed to Iraq, and I can tell you as a parent, you know how little power you have in life when you're praying every night that they just come home in one piece. Think about it for a second. Just after extracting ourselves from there, because the American people said no more, told the elites, and he did a terrible job of getting out, but we got to get out of this thing, and President Trump wanted to do it from day one. To know that they could be having a conversation on a guy at a high level in the Senate that's been briefed, a Republican, and you can put on the table combat troops and first strike nuclear. What are we talking about?
Yeah, that's absolutely insane. And before the show started, when we were talking about Ukraine, I compared it to Europe's own kind of Afghanistan. There's no winning or losing in Ukraine. It's only death, especially when you look at the larger history of what happened there. And today, the Ukrainian government had a military parade. The Ukrainian defense minister said that this is going to lead to a bloody massacre. He's warning Europe about 5 million refugees, and he's not wrong. Russia is making a very strong stance here. They're saying that they They want a legal guarantee that Ukraine will never join NATO or become a base for weapons that can target Russia. And they are saying very strongly that they will guarantee this themselves if they have to. They don't want to. There was a 2-hour call between Biden and Putin, whose, of course, relationships are very tethered, especially after Biden started attacking him publicly. But there's also plans for future talks. Luckily, we're still in the phase of diplomacy, and we need more of that.
Far be it from me to go back to Hunter Biden, but it shouldn't be lost on people that Biden's, gig with Burisma, that whole nightmare, right, was the Russian thing. These guys have been skimming money off the crooks in Ukraine for decades, okay? The Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative, they've been out there with their hand out with these guys. You can't trust any of them. A pox on all their houses. And the American people cannot be sucked in to what Brussels has been forcing this. Raheem Kassam's done some incredible reporting. He was there back in 15, I think, when they had the color revolution, or 13 when they had the color revolution.
I was there as well. I was in
my
my den.
Exactly. So my point is, you've been there.
Yeah.
Why are we in 2021 with all the problems we had, and we just extracted ourselves out of here, that now we're talking about an active deployment when we got our hands full? No to the Biden administration and that pencil neck Jay Sullivan. You got enough problems. Show me you have a plan in the South China Sea and around Taiwan, because if we lose Taiwan, you're not going to get a Ford F-150 for 5 years. Okay.
So I want to pull this up from Wikipedia. Roger Wicker is on the Senate Committee on Armed Services.
That's the biggest of the big. That's the Armed Services Committee,
right?
Because you have the Pascagoula Naval Base, Stennet and all those guys.
Well, I think that's important to point out.
This is big time. He's not some guy wandering around. This guy's briefed. He got the highest security clearances. He got briefed on that. He said they are actively running models. I'm not saying they're going to do it, but I'm saying when you look at the spectrum of things, that nothing should be off the table. Guys in the Pentagon, in the national security apparatus, are running scenarios. He said it. Scenarios where you're going to have a first strike tactical nuke, and you're going to have American combat troops.
Are the Russians, do they want the Ukraine for them to annex it or something?
Well,
I know he annexed Crimea, or they
Ukraine was very close to Russia with its sphere of influence.
They'd actually say the eastern Ukraine, they would actually argue as part of Russia.
Doesn't Ukraine just mean borderlands?
Yes.
That's what I was told when I was in Ukraine. It means borderlands. That's what they called it, the Ukraine.
Yes.
Interesting.
Now the people of Ukraine say drop the and just call it Ukraine because we're a country.
Yeah.
They changed the spelling of Kiev too.
And then there was a lot of U.S. intervention and a lot of nonprofits that got involved in Ukraine, and there was a revolution that was orchestrated, and that of course turned Ukraine from being corrupted by Russia to being corrupted by the European and NATO side, and now there's still corruption in Ukraine because the revolution was all based on corruption. That corruption has still continued to this day, and some people would argue was even made worse by this larger transition, quote, revolution, as some people are calling it.
Biden just kowtowed. Look, he had the 4-hour meeting with Xi. Beforehand, he said, on the stage, he said, we're gonna defend Taiwan. He had the 4-hour meeting, never mentioned the Wuhan. You look at the two readouts. You look at the Beijing readout, you look at the U.S. readout. Not one mention in 4 hours of the Wuhan lab or the CCP virus. Not 1 second to mention. He kowtowed. And he came out there and said, we're a firm believer in the one China policy. That Taiwan's a region of China and eventually will be united. We believe we have the one China policy. He kowtowed. He's gutless in China, and now he's trying to show his commander-in-chief bravado in against Russia in the Ukraine. This is another disaster.
It's that insecure bully on the playground who's like, I'm going to prove I'm tough by picking on the little kid.
Where's Corn Pop when we need him? Where's
It's
Corn
funny.
Pop?
I mean, look, Obama called Russia a regional power. Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, they were a regional power. That's what they are.
But
they aspire to be a world power like they used to be, but they're not. Because did I mention that the economy's the size of New York State, and they're in a demographic death spiral?
When Obama said this, it was seen as a slight.
Yes.
He was disparaging Putin because he knew Putin wanted to bring back the Soviet Union, that power, and he couldn't. And he was basically being like, look at us, we're the big dogs, and you're just a regional power.
Russia should be our ally in breaking up this Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, run by the CCP, trying to consolidate the Eurasian landmass. They should be an ally. We have forced them, right? And like I said, they're not good guys. They're not good guys. But the enemy of my enemy is my friend. and they could have been the enemy of our enemy, which is the Chinese Communist
I
Party.
don't like that. The idea, but I do think it's fair to say the enemy of my enemy can certainly work out an agreement with me in dealing with our mutual enemy.
How do we win we won World War II with Joseph Stalin? If we hadn't had this, the Russians that take 25 million combat casualties, we would have never defeated Hitler and Mussolini in the time it took to destroy him. But remember, just for your audience, today's the 80th commemoration of Pearl Harbor. Franklin Roosevelt went, I think tomorrow, technically, and declared war, the date that lives in infamy, declared war tomorrow, 80 years ago, on the Empire of Japan. He did not declare war on Nazi Germany or the Italian fascists. Hitler declared war on us the next day.
Yeah.
Because he had a secret treaty and he thought we were weak. He thought we were all talk and no action.
Meanwhile, we were building nuclear weapons.
And sending lots of money and weapons to the British.
But they were also working on nukes too, weren't they? We just beat them to it. I mean, they were developing rocketry.
They're very, very close. That's why they had the heavy water in Norway. Yeah,
that's why a lot of and the Germans.
That's why after the war. That's
after
the war. We took a lot of their scientists.
And the Russians did as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the Russians took their scientists.
I believe
and
they
experimenters.
They veered away from nuclear research into the VR2 rocket
Yes.
research so that they could start hitting
cruise
England.
missile. Yes.
And then because of that, they didn't get the nukes in time.
Wow.
Bad decision.
But
Very
they
bad.
would have.
Yeah, because the Blitzkrieg, wasn't that the Zeppelins over London? Was that what it was?
Yes.
So if they had gravity bombs, and if they focused on gravity bomb research instead of cruise missiles, they would have wiped out.
And I'd like to tell Senator Wicker, the first and only time tactical nukes were ever used is after the end of a 3.5 year, one of the bloodiest wars ever had in the Pacific, right? Because the Japanese would not surrender.
The kids
and
today.
yet he's sitting there with the Pentagon. Think about it. They are running scenarios tonight as we talk about inserting combat troops. I'm not going to say they're doing it, but they're thinking about it. They're not taking it off the table. So they're thinking now and modeling combat troops to join NATO and this EU army, right? This EU military thing that the French are trying to put together in the Ukraine, and they're modeling tactical nuclear strikes.
I did a lot of research on modern nuclear weapons for this segment I was actually doing with Discovery, Discovery Networks, and I gotta say, it was shocking how little people who are like millennials, for instance, understand the rapid technological advancement in nuclear weapons capability. The difference, and I will say this again, between what we used in World War II, that was a gravity bomb. What that means is it was a big bomb, we dropped it out of a plane. Since then, we've created intercontinental ballistic missiles, multiple independently targeted reentry vehicles carrying 12 warheads with 1,250 times the explosive power. And you know what else I learned? Did you know the radiation is on purpose?
Yes.
When a nuclear bomb goes off and it irradiates an area, that's intentional.
Yes.
There's actually Russian nuclear bombs that do not irradiate areas, and the U.S. has similar ones too. When we were doing this research, we looked at the simulation of which kind of weapon used by which country, what would the level of devastation be, the initial incendiary wave, the sonic, the shock wave, and the radioactive area. And what they do is, I think the New York Times did this, it was over Manhattan. What would happen to Manhattan? And you would pick, I'll use the Russian whatever missile, and it shows a wave of fire, just incendiary, wipes out from river to river in New York. But there's also lower kiloton bombs that heavily irradiate the area. When we talk about nukes, people need to understand this. A nuclear strike on Russia could mean a lot of things. It could mean destroying that area for hundreds of years.
And it's not just nuclear weapons that we have to worry about, since, of course, Vladimir Putin even hinted at biological weapons,
yes,
natural disaster weapons, and also artificial intelligence weapons. As, of course, Vladimir Putin on the world stage a couple years ago came out and said, artificial intelligence is going to be a lot more powerful and lethal than nuclear weapons himself. He also said that the country that leads the world in the development of artificial intelligence will be the ruler of the world. So these are the types of situations that we're dealing with that is even far more complex than nuclear weapons, which on the base level we're just beginning to
I'm
see
no
discussion.
Eric Schmidt fan, but the paper they put up for the Defense Department a year ago, and it came out with this book with Kissinger recently, but the paper they came out with a year ago said the exact same thing. Said that there's an arms race now on AI, and AI will be the future. There's already all types of weapons that
you can see the future if you have a smart enough artificial intelligence that can calculate probabilities and variables. in the proper way, looking at all the data from social media, they can predict things.
I would imagine it would be able to control drones, turn them around, drop bombs on their other targets, missiles, shut off water.
I want to say
shut
about
off
biological
electricity.
weapons. Look, what came out of Wuhan, we know, was part of the PLA's, CCP's biological weapons program. Okay, that was being researched at the time. So you could have all types of biological weapons. Ukraine is a scab you don't want to pick. Okay, because there's going to be a lot of pus coming out of there.
I want to point out an easy way for people to understand the power of artificial intelligence. Take a look at what they're talking about with self-driving cars. You know, I've got a Tesla. I could sit down in it. You pull the thing down twice, the car drives itself. Now what they're talking about is we're not going to need, the road signs we have and all of these things. We don't need them. You're not going to need any road signs because the cars talk to each other. So when two cars are coming at each other, you don't need lanes. The cars just know how far apart to be. And once all cars are smart, look at what they can do and predict and how they can move around. Now think about the weaponization capabilities of that. They will be able to use social media data, communications technology to predict exactly where someone will be. We've long joked, and I know this is meant to be silly, that Facebook knows when you poop.
Yeah.
They literally do. There was an article talking about how Facebook can predict based on how long you've been sitting in one place, when the last time you got food was, that they know when you will go to the bathroom, and they predict that. Now imagine you've got a military general. Oh, they can predict when you poop. They can also predict where you'll be, when you'll be there. They can effectively see the future. And then they can just say, drop a Hellfire missile. And you know what? We got an 87% chance of him actually being there. That's going to be the future of AI warfare. It will be terrifying. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.